And our goal is to connect young Tibetan students and everyone interested in Tibetan culture and use our knowledge to help the Tibetan community. For example, we have helped young students for their entrance exams, for the gymnasium, or held cultural nights where maybe a few of you been. And yes, our members are from various institutions, such as the University of Zurich, that we are here today, in ETH, and also other universities. So yes, today the Sigula will be speaking about a very interesting topic, the Central Tibetan Administration. I am sure this will be a new way to find out everything you want about the Tibetan government, so please do not hesitate to ask questions directly during the Q&A session. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the event.
And also on behalf of the Tibetan Youth Association in Europe, I'd like to welcome you, and it's a great honor to have you here in our presence today. And also we appreciate you taking time for us to engage with the youth. We know how busy your schedule is, so truly thank you very much. And my name is Ari Amipa. I'm a co-president of the Tibetan Youth Association in Europe, TYAE. And we have been founded in 1970 in Switzerland and have been since then active in 3 areas. One being politics with different campaigns and the direct actions as well. The latest being last weekend with SFT and VTAG in Paris and Hungary, as some of you may have seen online. And also cultural. There we have a task force, Rikshung, which is dedicated to keeping Tibetan traditions and values alive and promoting Tibetan culture, whether it be on social media through fact posts and making Tibetan culture accessible. And there was even, we have different kinds of workshops on Tibetan Buddhism literature. And once there even was a funny play that promoted Tibetan culture. And then we also have the social area where we organize events where Tibetan youth in exile get to connect with other young Tibetans, which is very important, especially here, as many of our members are sometimes the only Tibetans in the community there. So we make sure that we create events where they can engage with other young Tibetans, get a sense of Tibetan identity in exile through tournaments, whether it be sports tournaments, soccer tournaments, or gatherings, barbecues, parties. And most importantly, our General Assembly, which takes place once a year over a whole weekend, where we have fun workshops, public talks, and get to engage with our members for one whole weekend. And this weekend, this General Assembly this year, we had the pleasure to have Amaje Zubibala as our honorary guest, which really delighted us. And would you like to introduce?
So my name is Uma Getza, and I am leading this talk together with Arya today, and I am myself a member of the Student Network Tibet and also of the Tibetan Youth Association Europe. And it's a pleasure that so many of you came today, and yeah, I'm looking forward to this afternoon with you all.
And before we start with our Q&A, we actually gathered questions beforehand. We asked our members, we asked the youth what they want to know about, what topics that we should touch on. So before we start, I'd like to give the word to you if you want to say a few words.
Thank you for the opportunity to organize this Tibetan Youth Association in Europe and Student Network Tibet for organizing this event. Sometimes we feel that people know about us, then we get this feeling that people don't know about us. So it's important that we reach out to the younger generations of Tibetans and also students in different countries. So I've been trying to reach out to, I have taken opportunities to speak to youth in different countries. For example, in UK, I spoke at Oxford at Westminster University, at Aberdeen, and last one was in Warwick University. So we try to do the same in different countries that I visit. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We knew that we were getting a little late, so we had this video, a short video, which was already screened on the Central Tibetan Administration. I think the university also have its rules not to cross certain topics. So today's topic is Central Tibetan Administration. Some people also call us the Tibetan government in exile. So anything that you want to know, you already have the basic information. You already have the very active Tibetan Youth Association in Europe through them, and the Tibetan the Student Network Tibet. I'm sure you already must have had interaction with them and have the basic knowledge about Tibet. Normally I carry some pictures, because these pictures speaks louder than words, so at least to give you an idea of where Tibet is, how big Tibet is, and some people, of course, we define ourselves as the heavenly abode, the land surrounded by snow mountain ranges, because we are located on the top of the world. So people also call Tibet the roof of the world because of its altitude. The Swiss Alps and all those are high, but those are like base camp in Tibet. You start climbing from there. And Chinese environmental scientists call Tibet as the third pole because Tibet has the largest amount of glaciers and permafrost that feeds all these major rivers in Asia. So, and the Asians call Tibet the watchtower of Asia. So it's not just the political or the geostrategic importance of Tibet and the environmental importance of Tibet, but also the Tibetan Buddhist culture that has a lot of potential to spread more peace and compassion in this world, which is very much needed in this violence-ridden world. I'll stop here and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. As I've said, we have gathered the questions that youth is interested in and had a survey that we collected. And the first question is fundamental basics, but we as Tibetans have a rare or even a unique model having a Tibetan government in exile. And it's a testament to His Holiness' vision if we think about those times, having lost your country, your home, seeing your people suffer, having to flee to India, and in the midst of all that, having the strength and vision, long-term vision, to set up a government in exile. But to someone who doesn't know all that, doesn't have maybe a Tibetan background, how do you usually explain the function or what the CTA is and its function? I'm sure you meet many foreign reporters, journalists, and politicians. How do you explain to them the function of the CTA and why it exists like this?
Just to give you a little background on what you have already seen in the video, Tibet was an independent country, and then the Chinese government forced us to sign the 17-point agreement in 1951 after the invasion of Tibet. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he was only 19 years old, he went to China in 1954-55, and he saw how communist government functioned. Even though everything was very orderly, people didn't have the freedom to speak. And then His Holiness came to India in 1956-57. He was invited for the 2500th death anniversary of the Buddha, called the Buddha Jayanti, and he visited Indian Parliament. Indian democracy was also at a very nascent stage, just 10 years after independence. It was, even though it was quite chaotic, His Holiness found that everybody had the freedom to speak. So when His Holiness had to flee Tibet into India, into exile, under very difficult circumstances, because Tibetans have not many Tibetans have been out of Tibet, because it's not easy to go into Tibet or out of Tibet. You have to climb so many mountains, down so many valleys, and then up many mountains. So, and Tibetans always lived on that high plateau with an average of 12,000 feet above sea level. So we are used to cold weather, not to hot weather. And India, in some places in India, is very hot. And Tibetans were put up in two camps. and many Tibetans died because of the climatic conditions and also dietary problems. And we had no skill whatsoever, so we were later put up in the foothills of Himalayas, like my parents or the younger ones who are here, whose parents have come from India. They all engaged in road construction. That was the only thing we could do, hard labor. And later we were established into compact communities in India and Nepal. That's how we managed to preserve our identity. But not just even 1 year after coming into exile, His Holiness said that we came into exile, His Holiness stepped on Indian soil on 31st March 1959. And on 3rd February 1960, he told the Tibetans that we should have representative government. And just 7 months after that, we had our first parliament, and Tibetans were just trying to make a living in a new country under very difficult circumstances. So the first 30 years was difficult. From 1960 to 1990, then His Holiness introduced more and more democracy as we started learning, because initially Tibetans had no idea what democracy is all about, what institutions you need in a democracy. So today, responding to the question, of course, one of our main responsibilities is to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict. So His Holiness follows what is called the middle way policy, so not seeking separation from China, because whether we like it or not, our ancestors lived with China as neighbors for so many centuries in peace and harmony with each other. We never had much problems. And the Chinese always lived in the plains and we always lived in the mountains. So even now, we follow the middle way policy to seek a non-violent, mutually beneficial, lasting solution to the Sino-Tibet conflict. So I had to reach out to the Chinese government to do that. And the other part of our job is that we, as you have seen, we are the only exiled government with a fully functional democratic structure and polity. So it is good that we have a democratic structure, but that also takes time to manage. So I spent, in my responsibility as Sikong, I spent 6 months to manage the democracy and 6 months traveling around the world, meeting with the Tibetan communities that are spread across the world, and also reach out to governments, parliaments, to the media, think tanks, and talk about Tibet and the reality that is happening there, and also what China is doing to Tibet and what is also happening in China. So we just don't talk only about Tibet, but we talk about the global geopolitics and the evolving situation, which is very dynamic and fluid these days. And we have to keep studying, keep informing ourselves, and also educate other people, because compared to Europeans, we understand China more than the Europeans. So there are a lot of things that European governments can also learn from us, and that's what we try to do.
Thank you very much for giving us that background, because I think, I hope I speak for a lot of us. I mean, most of us are Tibetan youth, I think, and many of us also grew up here in the West, so the Tibetan government in exile, the Central Tibetan administration, is something that exists for us, but it's like very far away and very, so we, for example, I myself, I'm not really connected very personally to the government. So yeah, we saw earlier in the video, because you mentioned the middle way, the approach of the middle way, which is something that comes from religion. And there is also a department of religion and culture, part of the government. And I think as Tibetans, we know that for some Tibetans, religion plays a big part of their identity. But for Western democracies, it is not common to have such a department. So can you talk about, elaborate about the function, the exact function of that department and how it works, and generally the influence of religion in the politics of the administration?
So The Tibetan, many people ask us as to whether Tibetan language has anything to do with Chinese language, because right now Tibet is occupied by China, but there is nothing to do with Chinese language. The Tibetan script came from the Indian Brahmi and Gupta script. So even now, if we read the alphabets, ka, kha, kha, nga, it's very similar to Hindi. They have ka, kha, kha, ga, nga, one more consonant in that set. So, after we invented the Tibetan script, about 100 years later, then Buddhism really established in Tibet. And we follow what is called as the Nalanda tradition of Buddhism. That traces back to Nagarjuna, who was the founder of the Nalanda tradition, which means to say that the Tibetan religion, Tibetan Buddhist culture is based on logic, reasoning. So it's not a blasphemy to question Buddha's wisdom. If you have better wisdom than Buddha, logic is a very important component of that part. So Buddhism came to Tibet, started in 7th century, but then in 8th century it really established, and then there were, of course, ups and downs and all that. And we transliterated every available Sanskrit and Pali text into Tibetan. So we are the only country that has the whole component of Buddhist teachings in Tibetan language. And we are very proud to be a repository of one part of ancient Indian wisdom that is based on non-violence and compassion. So since then, now over the last 1,300, 400 years, Tibetans have been practicing Buddhism, and Buddhism always played a very central role in our way of life. That defines our way of life. The philosophy defines that. That is why it is so important to us, and that also has the potential, to spread more peace in this world. So, having said that, you will find in independent Tibet, you will find monasteries everywhere, in every village, in every town, in every big city. So some of the biggest monasteries used to have 7,700 monks, 5,500 monks. Now that those big monasteries are destroyed in China, so it's now down to 400, 500 monks in these big monasteries. So we managed to replicate all of this in exile. So in South India, you still have big monasteries with 4,000, 5,000 monks. Not all Tibetan, but many from the Himalayan region who also follows the same religion. So the Department of Religion and Culture is responsible for some 292 monasteries and nunneries in India and Nepal. That has about now close to 40,000 monks and nuns. But we don't interfere in the running of the monasteries because they are established monasteries based on centuries-old tradition of institutionalized education. So we don't interfere because they are different schools and they have different curriculums and also different tenets of different traditions also have different branches and different ways of achieving enlightenment. So we don't interfere in all that, but we do take care. We organize group prayers for the long life of His Holiness, for the, to seek blessings from the religious figures on resolving the Sino-Tibet conflict, and taking care of old, infirm monks and nuns who need support. All of that we do, but we don't interfere in the running of monasteries and nunneries. Now, after His Holiness, in the beginning also, even in our parliament right now, we have representatives from different traditions. That is because it was important to get all the Tibetans together from different traditions and different provinces. So even now, our parliament represents different regions and traditions. And this is still a question that is very debatable as to whether we need to continue this or not. Now, after His Holiness decided to devolve all his political and administrative responsibilities in 2011, then there were a lot of analysis as to whether the Tibetans have really reached this stage, whether we managed to separate the state and the church. But then From a Western concept, you look at the medieval ages where the churches were very strong, and then there were a lot of issues regarding how the churches used to run the society or influence the society. But in our case, it's still different. That is why when His Holiness is asked this question, whether you think the separation of state and church is good or not, His Holiness responds that religion is meant to bring peace and harmony to individuals and also collectively as a society. Politicians are there to work for the betterment of the people. So if a politician is guided by religious principles, not using religion as a tool to create divisions within the community or the society, then it's for the betterment of everybody. So I try to do that based on the advice of His Holiness and the wisdom of His Holiness. We tend to be guided by our spiritual values and do our political work. So this combination is very important. You just cannot separate religion with politics. But even if you are an atheist, but His Holiness has a very broad-minded, His Holiness very broad-minded visionary, and he always says that when it comes to religion, you practice your religion, but you respect all other religions. That is why he always takes part. This is one of his commitments, his second commitment, to bring interreligious harmony amongst different religions. So he goes to Christians, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, and he visits all the monasteries. So if we understand religion from that perspective, but it's very good. Then one of the things that His Holiness always says, because we have a lot of atheists in this world, including people who follow communism. So one thing that His Holiness has come out is SEE learning, S-E-E learning. So social, emotional, and ethical learning. These days, people do find that there is a lot of things wrong with education, with modern education, which focuses more on individual benefits, individual rights. So His Holiness always thinks about collective interests. That is why you have schools in Western countries where they teach about social and emotional learning. But one thing missing is the ethical part. So His Holiness added ethical to that. And His Holiness has introduced this collaboration between the Tibetans and the Emory University. And they have been working over many years to develop a secular curriculum, not based on any particular religion, but every religion speaks about compassion, love, forgiveness. So those good human values are integrated onto in these teachings, in this curriculum. And this, I think, is one of the biggest contributions of His Holiness to the world that caters to both believers and non-believers. So wherever we go, we always try to encourage schools. I remember once where I accompanied His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 2014-15 to UK, and one of the ministers came to meet with His Holiness, and the first thing he mentioned to His Holiness was that we have a lot of problem with youth. And then His Holiness remarked that there is something wrong with the education system. And this is the solution for secular ethics and secular education. And I hope I answered the question.
You just mentioned how as politicians you work towards the betterment of the people, cater towards their problems. During the Q&A 2 weeks ago, we heard about the water shortage Tibetan farmers face in India. And you spoke on the renovation of roads going on. There is the demographic shift in the settlements, whereas many of the younger generations move towards the city, move towards the west, resulting in the settlements mainly being populated by the older generations. And there's also the worsening human rights situation in Tibet. So there's so many issues to tackle, so many things going on at the same time. What are the current most important issues that the CTA is working on and is tackling? Yes.
Yeah, it is a complete different issue to talk about Tibetans in Tibet. and the Tibetans in exile in the diaspora community. So there is nothing much that we can do directly to Tibetans inside Tibet. So that is why they are still suffering and they are under very difficult circumstances. What we try to do in exile is, when I stood for election, I never asked anybody, please vote for me. I never do that. I said, if you give me the responsibility, then I'll do these things. So there are three basic principles that we talked about. One was equity, or equitable distribution of our resources. So whatever we do, we don't only cater to people who are able to reach out to the administration. There are some people in every society who are very smart, and some are over smart, and they know where they get benefits, and they know where to reach, and they get all the benefits. And some people are really poor, and and they don't know whom to reach. That's why our basic principle, and that is the basis on which we try to work. And then the second one is the cooperative effort, because I, as elected, democratically elected leader alone, cannot do everything. So it has to be a collective responsibility and collective effort by everybody. And whenever things are achieved, also, we never claim the credit, I did it. That never comes from me. At least we always say it's a collective responsibility. And the third thing is to move forward. There's no space to move backward. So as we came into this responsibility, we were aware of this situation, because before I became Sikyong, I was in the parliament for 20 years. And during those 20 years, I was also the Speaker of the Parliament for 7.5 years. And that gave me the confidence that I can take up this responsibility. And also had some experience reaching out to the international community, not just understanding the problems within our community. So we found two challenges within the diaspora exile community. One challenge was the dispersing compact communities. So because His Holiness was always a visionary, and he worked with the first Indian Prime Minister to establish these compact communities where we could start our own schools, our religious institutions, cultural institutions, and all that. Because of that, we managed to preserve our identity so far. Now, that is coming under threat, because more and more younger generations are moving out to Indian cities and towns, or to foreign countries like here in Switzerland. And that is because we were not able to provide them with the kind of employment that's required of the education they received. The previous generation didn't have much education. So when we were kids, we used to work very hard on the fields as a farmer. So this is one challenge of the dispersing Tibetan community, and it has a cyclical impact, because when younger generation who can give birth to children go out, then you have less children in the settlements. So it impacts our school system, and it impacts the vibrancy of those compact communities. And the other challenge that we found was that in the last 30, 40 years, there were Tibetans who came from Tibet. Since the early 80s, because before 80s, it was not possible for Tibetans to come out or Tibetans to go in. And, during Mao Zedong's time, there was 10 years of Cultural Revolution where some 6,000 Tibetan monasteries were destroyed, and some 1.2 million Tibetans directly or indirectly died because of China's occupation of Tibet. So the ones who came since 80s, numbers vary. By 2008, we used to receive any number between 2,500 and 50,000 Tibetans from inside Tibet. Most of them children left behind in India to study, not knowing whether they will ever meet their families again or not. And then when they cross over the Himalayas illegally, they had to suffer a lot. Some lose their fingers and toes because of frostbite, and some die on the way. So it's very risky climbing over the Himalayas. But these people have nothing to call their own, not even an inch of land. So this was another challenge. So we looked at both the challenges. One challenge is solution for another one. So our mind we have to always apply our mind to find solutions to every problem. So these people who doesn't own anything, if we can move them to the compact communities, then it will bring vibrancy to the compact communities, and it will also resolve their problem not having habitation, home, So this is what we are doing right now. So as I was traveling this time, our schedules are busy, as they say, last 15 days, one day in Zurich, one day in Bern, one day in Paris, the next day in Milan, Trento, Bolzano, then Innsbruck, then Munich, then 4 days in Berlin, then I was back in Rome, then last 2 days in Vienna. Today we are here and we have a 3 days meeting, but then I have to go back to France and then back to India. So during one visit, we have a lot of compact programs. So this program, as I was traveling around, I'm still getting all my reports from India. I have to speak, I have to reach out, but I have to also listen to what is happening there and, instruct them where things are going. So in Ladakh, we are now working. The work has started because Tibetan nomads living on the borders. Now, another 10, 15 years, we don't know whether these nomadic establishments will be able to survive because the younger generation doesn't come back to nomadic life. So we have to forecast challenges in future and look for solutions now so that we don't face the ferocity of those challenges when it's right in front of you. So we are working the first phase of providing housing for Tibetans who don't have housing. It has already started in Ladakh, the planning going on in Hunsu, in Manpat, and all of those. So, but the opportunity is that now we have so many Tibetans outside, and I'm very proud when you speak so lucidly and conducting these meetings. I feel proud and I feel safe that our future will be in safe hands. So thank you very much for doing a good job. That's all the Tibetans are doing. So as every community has the saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And after we came into the office, we started this platform called WeTAC, Voluntary Tibetan Advocacy Group, where every Tibetan can come on board, and particularly the younger generation. So you talked about the disconnect, so we invite young Tibetans, 100 young Tibetans every year to Dharamsala, all of that paid for trip, and then we give them education about CEA and others, and they come back and start their own WeTACs, youth groups of that sort. There will be opportunities for all of you. And if we are able to find more time, more money, then we can organize 2 in a year, or maybe longer period, to build this community together. So we are getting dispersed, we are getting physically distant, but we have to work towards getting all of ourselves emotionally closer.
Yes, thank you very much for elaborating on also challenges that the government has, because, like you said, you're not inside of the country, you can't directly act. So, in process of finding or working towards solutions of all these kinds of problems we face with the lack of equity or the disconnect of Tibetan youth with the government in exile. So it would mean a lot if you could talk a little bit about also your own, sometimes maybe you feel also frustrated, sometimes you maybe also feel hopeless. Can you talk a little bit about that feeling you maybe have or the government is facing?
I have learned to overcome all these feelings. That is what Buddhism teaches you. That is what His Holiness messages teaches you. So sometimes you will tell me, you must be getting discouraged. I say, I never get discouraged. We have to live in hope. If there is no hope, there is no cause. So we keep our hope going, and the more I meet with the community, I promised my community that I will visit them 2 times in 5 years. And this is my second trip to Switzerland, and I try to reach out to the elders. When I go to the Tibetan settlements, I just don't go there and speak to them, have a large meeting and go back. I visit every single camp. I visit every single institution. I see problems firsthand. So when I go back to Dharamsala, it makes it much easier for us to take decisions. It's not just me. I believe in empowerment. Yeah, so right now, we are, our charter says there's elected Sejong, and then you can have 7 ministers for 7 departments. And right now, we are only myself and 3 other ministers, and all 3 are ladies, women. So I believe in women empowerment, and I believe empowerment is equal to opportunities. Now it's for the women to prove themselves. If you don't have opportunities, then you can't prove them yourself. So, yeah, in the parliament also sometimes people are very brash. Sometimes they speak out of, not based on our traditional values. But I don't get deterred by all this. I take it as an opportunity to explain ourselves. And I sometimes call the parliament session my retreat session. That is where I practice my meditation. Meditation is nothing but concentration of mind. And so you concentrate on the questions, you concentrate on what is being said, and you also concentrate on what you have to reply. That is nothing but meditation. It's analytical meditation, not just sitting in one place and not talking, And then when people speak in different things, then you have to practice your compassion. You have to practice your forgiveness and all that. So this is a lesson that I learned through my life of public life, and I don't get discouraged now. And nobody can discourage me also, not even the Chinese government, despite all the messages that I receive from them.
Thank you very much. Our next topic is another current global topic that has very much to do with Tibet, and that is the climate crisis. Tibet, as you've mentioned before, warms up 3 times faster than the rest of the world. The glaciers are melting, ecosystems are getting destroyed by China, and environment activists inside Tibet are getting imprisoned. That is such a universal problem that we're facing, and in which Tibet plays a big part, because the effects are dramatic in our land. So I feel like this is the chance to get Tibet on everyone talk about Tibet, especially climate activists, to include Tibet in their activism. So I wanted to ask how the Tibetan government is tackling this issue. For example, are you writing to organizations like Fridays for Future, or here it's Klimastreik, maybe you guys know the Klimastreik, to speak up about Tibet and to include it in the discussion of climate change? What are your plans on this topic?
We have a Tibet Policy Institute in Dharamsala, which studies about the environmental situation and environmental impacts of Tibet, not only on Tibetans, but also for the whole region and globally. So last time I was in Brazil, just before going to Brazil, I came across scientific research, which astounded me a little bit. And when I spoke to the Brazilians also, they were taken by surprise, because we are on 2 sides of the world. Brazil is the lung of the world, and Tibet is the roof of the world. And some climate experts have studied this over a long period of time, the impact of the Amazonia on the roof of the world. So they came to the conclusion that when there is more rain in the Amazonia, it snows less in Tibet, and when there's more snow in Tibet, it rains less in the Amazonia. So when these correlations can be connected half the world away, then we are talking about serious consequences in the region, because the rivers that originate from Tibet flows into China in the name of Yellow and Yangtze, the 2 lifelines of China. Without these 2 rivers, China cannot support its 1.4 billion people. And the Chinese civilization is also established. It's the cradle of Chinese civilization on the Yellow River. And then in the west, you have the Indus, which is also another cradle to another civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, two of the most oldest civilizations. And then the other rivers like Mekong that flows into 5 Southeast Asian countries like Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Burma, and Thailand. And then you have India and Bangladesh, where Brahmaputra flows, the Karnali flows into Nepal. So Tibetan rivers originate from that Tibetan plateau, flows into 10 different countries. And the countries that I've mentioned are some of the most densely populated areas in the world. So some environmental scientists say that out of 8 billion people, 1.8 billion people have something or the other to do with rivers that originate from Tibet. Now, as we go to Southeast Asia, now you hear a lot of individual stories of people's livelihoods being changed because China wants to control all the resources, including water. So China builds multiple dams on Tibetan rivers, and the one that we heard about a few months ago in Derge and Jomda on the Upper Yangtze, this is one out of 13 dams that they are planning to build. And it's not just have impact on the climatic conditions, but also on the people who live there. And the heritage that gets inundated, the whole Tibetan plateau came up because of the tectonic shift between the Gondwana plate and the Eurasian plate, and the environmental scientists still say that Tibet is growing by 10 millimeter every year. The mountains are growing. So we are talking, and it's all a seismic zone. And China is building big mega dams, and one dam that is being planned at this place in Pema, the Tibetan name, where the Brahmaputra takes a U-turn to come into India. They are building a dam twice the size of Three Gorges, which is the biggest dam in the world. And this dam is supposed to produce 3 times more hydroelectricity than Three Gorges. Now, when you talk about a mega dam like that, how much land and property or the flora and fauna that are unique to that environment is going to be inundated and destroyed. And since that being a seismic zone, if something happens to that side of the dam, what's going to happen to people downstream? In Arunachal Pradesh, in Assam, in Bangladesh, it's also a very populated nation, So they will all be destroyed. And we are not talking about consequences on Tibet alone. The jet streams that flow over the Tibet impacts the monsoon season in India, determines the hot spots, hot places in India, and the impact of the jet streams and also the El Nino impact together has a lot of climate change impact. And we are talking about serious food security and water security in the region. Some people say the Third World War could happen because of water. If that is the case, then Tibet is a huge ecological hotspot. So this is what we try to tell government wherever we go. And then wherever they are, it's very difficult because China controls all that water like a water tap. And if there's excess of water, they let it flow, and then you have floods downstream. If there's a shortage of water, they cut it off, and then you have drought downstream. But unfortunately, most of these countries are dependent on China economically, and they are not able to speak up. So it's even very difficult to reach out to non-governmental organizations in the region. We do try to organize. When I was in Delhi, we organized the first water conference way back in 2005, when people were not even talking about those issues. So even today, we try to reach out to, last year we did organize one such conference in Thailand, because they are also being impacted. But governments are still they shy away from speaking about this for fear of angering China. And the Tibetan activists, many of you must have also taken part in raising Tibet issue at COP meetings. But unfortunately, there's not much space for us. Even at the United Nations, we have to piggyback on some other civil society to speak about ourselves. Even at COP meetings, it's very difficult for us to get a space to speak about. So the next time I go to the United States, I'll definitely try to meet with John Kerry, because he's the special envoy on climate change, and ask him to raise the issue of Tibet at the COP meetings to take it up as the third pole then people will start asking why Tibet is supposed to generate those kind of interests. But right now, when it comes to climate, when it comes to business, when it comes to human rights, when it comes to other things, even European countries shy away from speaking other things. So we have to encourage people to stand up for their values, because China respects only strength, not weakness.
Thank you very much. So moving on from issues to a question regarding support. As we as Tibetans follow the way of Ahimsa, we fight a non-violent struggle. And as His Holiness always says, we have the power of the truth, while they have the power of the gun. Therefore, we don't rely on violence. We use facts and reason and logic to garner support, appeal to the world. And also when we look back in history, it's very important for us to have those relations and supporters. When China marched into Tibet and we asked the world for help, our pleas were left unanswered, and it was only El Salvador who was willing to hand in a plea for support at the UN in 1950. So for us, it's really important to maintain and nourish relationships with supporters. And we followed you the last couple of weeks on social media as well, seeing you meet many politicians from different countries in Switzerland, in France, in South Tyrol, Italy you mentioned, in Austria you were just there. How does the CTA manage and gain supporters, and what's the feedback been the last couple of weeks?
Now, with the evolving dynamism in global politics, there is a lot more interest in Tibet. That gives us a little more space to speak about Tibet. Earlier, when I was a speaker, even then I used to travel, but there was not much interest. There was not much space to speak about Tibet. Now, because of China's behavior, everybody wants to understand China better. When I was in Mexico, I spoke at 5 universities. I met political leaders, but they had no idea of what China is doing around the world. So it's very important for us to educate the global community about what China is doing and what strategies they follow. As you said, His Holiness always says, supporting Tibet is supporting truth and justice, not going against China. You don't look at it from that perspective. If you want to support truth and justice, then you support Tibet. So, yes, even now, some governments are not as forthcoming as we would have liked them to be, but we have to try at every level where we are able to reach parliamentarians. One definite group. Sometimes are very, very important because politicians don't have time to study all these details. So sometimes go into details. And now we can see a lot of reports coming out of Europe also. So when we go to European countries, we say, please don't look at us as we give some communism, only as we give some communism, and you need to sympathize, we give some money and they'll be happy. No. If you nobody wants some money in China, right? Which is the second largest economy in the world, it will have severe consequences globally. So if you want positive changes, then look at us as partners. Because we understand China better than many other European countries, So if you can look at us as partners, because to bring positive change, you need both internal forces and external forces. We are internal forces to depend on the views among those managers. The humble person, you want to include families as well, and the true democracy leaders in China. So these are all the internal forces which can, working with external forces, bring positive change in China. This is one thing we tell them. The other thing we tell them is, if you keep calling, there is a Chinese expression to bend your body down, to give respect to the emperors, and even the communist leaders like to be treated as emperors of the Middle Kingdom. So if you keep calling to the Chinese more and more, today you are on your 2 legs, then you will be on your 4. And then the Chinese, then you will become like a donkey, and the Chinese will keep riding you. If that is what you want, you can bow down that is not, you don't want to donkey, you have to stand up with values. And then, so my friends also tell me how the dragon is fighting at us. Right? So